Hey, what's up? How you
Hey
doing?
man, I'm good. Happy spring, Pete. How are you?
Hi, Vanessa. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How is everyone?
Excellent.
Terrific.
I'm excited to talk about the big leagues and the Marlin Drive framework. I'm super pumped. I didn't realize it had its own acronym, so I'm super excited. But I think you have some stuff for us to cover, huh?
Yes, just really quick. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. To introduce myself, my name is Vanessa. Welcome to our Modern Sales Pros event here today. Today, we're diving into Welcome to the Big Leagues, secrets of private equity-backed scaled sales excellence with two of the best minds in the business. Everyone who's watching, please drop in the chat where you're tuning in from. We always love to see the global footprint of our amazing MSP community. We have a fantastic pairing today with AJ Gandhi, who's the Chief Growth Officer at Marlin Equity Partners, and Pete Kazanjy, who is the co-founder and CRO at Atrium. And the insights they'll share are the kind you won't find anywhere else, only here at Modern Sales Pros. So, as a quick icebreaker here today, AJ and Pete, what was your dream job growing up?
Dream job growing up. Well, I know my 6-year-old. He just got over his trash man phase, right? And then I think now he wants to be a ninja. So I think it was like I was too like that was too long ago for me to remember. But I'm gonna go with my I'm gonna channel my 6-year-old who's like really into ninjas right now because of Lego Ninjago. That's his big thing. AJ, what about you? What did you wanted to be a revenue operations guru
Yeah,
when you
that
grew
that
up
was
when you
de-
were
that
when you
was
were little?
definitely it, Pete. The role that I always thought was the most compelling was being a starting pitcher for a baseball team. It's
Ooh.
it's a role where basically every play evolves around you, and uh, it's an immense feeling of power, but it's also a feeling of pressure. And
Mm.
I just kind of I always thought it was a cool role. So I didn't really get
Sounds
any
like
clue
sales
in.
leadership.
Yeah, kind of. I didn't make it past wiffle ball league, but it was pretty fun doing as far as being a pitcher.
Nice. I like it.
Amazing. Mine was to be a princess, so I'm still I'm still waiting on that to this day. Okay, we're gonna move on. For those new here, welcome to MSP. We're the world's largest and finest community for over 35,000 members in sales management, leadership, operations, and enablement. We take to heart the road less traveled and are thrilled to bring you here along for the journey. Our mission is to help you tackle the tough questions and discover opportunities you might not know exist yet. We do this through vibrant live sessions like this one here today, an engaging online forum, our must attend summits with brilliant speakers, and an expanding array of in person events nationwide. So keep an eye out. We might be coming to a city near you very soon. If you're not
Woohoo!
part of MSP yet, we'll reveal your details after the event. And if you're fit, we'll extend an exclusive invite for you to join our community of modern sales professionals. And before we begin, some housekeeping. Just a quick note, we are recording the session and our audience is always live and engaging, so get ready to participate. If you have any questions, please drop them into the Q&A at any time for our speakers. And of course, we can't move on without saying a quick thank you and shout out to Atrium for sponsoring today's event. If their tools spark your interest, there's a demo request button at the very top. So please give it a click if you think it could be a game changer for you and your team. And Pete, this is where I'll pass it off to you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks, Vanessa. AJ, I'm super pumped to have you here today. I'm excited to talk about the playbook that you guys deploy across, Marlin Equity's portfolio. But we'll get into that here in a second after we do some introductions. But folks, my name is Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders for Atrium. We make sales performance management software that helps organizations, as you can kind of see right here, improve reputation through better management, right? Through better management, through accountability, coaching, encouragement, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we spend our time doing. It's all about sales excellence. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here since we have some. We got some slides here from AJ's framework, but just kind of some quick intros. My name's Pete. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. Um, prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014, and that's where I really went from being what I call a business generalist founder to being our first seller, our first sales manager, our first sales leader there. And so kind of like that's where I started realizing how sales was a system and like how revenue kind of factories worked, if you will. My background is actually in product management and product marketing, and so I kind of had a prepared mind to think about these things as systems and what have you. So that's a little bit about me, but more importantly, you guys are super pumped today to have AJ here to kind of share a little bit about how Marlin Equity helps their portfolio companies really accelerate the growth of their business through better go-to-market, through enhanced go-to-market rigor and execution, and that's kind of his job at Marlin. So AJ, maybe you can tell folks a little bit about Marlin. People have probably maybe have heard of like the Vista Equities of the world or what have you, but Marlin is has a bunch of great logos, but maybe a little bit of a lesser known brand than some of the ones people might be familiar with. So maybe the portfolio, kind of the assets under management, and then some of your background as well, and then we can kind of jump into your framework.
Yeah, sure. Happy to, Pete. So Marlin Equity Partners, we're a mid-sized private equity firm, about 9 billion under management, 50-ish companies in the portfolio.
Nice.
They're pretty much control positions. We seek to partner with management teams very, very closely. I think that's the operating style that we have. There's certain funds that are really very prescriptive about how companies should be run. There are other funds that are really very kind of laissez-faire, and they just sort of let management work. The key thing that we try to do is we just try to be helpful. So we've invested a fair bit in our operating capability, and we keep busy with companies anywhere from 10 million ARR up to 500 million ARR. About 2/3 North America, 1/3 in Europe, and do a lot of vertical software, a couple of spaces, quite a variety of spaces that we like. But we've got a nice variety, and always plan to keep busy with.
Yeah, and like some logos that people might be familiar with there. So like, one company that we're lucky enough to work with that's a Marlin Portco is a company called Fourth. They're a combination of what hot schedules and then kind of, which is SMB scheduling software, and then and kind of the European counterpart to that now is it's like creating an entire kind of like a restaurant small business like operating system across the board there. Meltwater, pretty big name in the industry as well as a recent Marlin company. And then so before you got into working with Marlin, AJ, maybe you can kind of share with folks a little bit of like what you kind of spent your time doing ahead of that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think, Pete, private equity is sort of a side hustle for me. My real job is sort of throwing parties for go-to-market leaders. That's really how I spend my time. Yeah.
AJ makes amazing paella. He's don't get it twisted. Analytical, operationally excellent. Sales operations. No, paella king.
Yeah, I just like being around smart and interesting go-to-market people, and it's been really fun. So since the sort of pandemic receded, that's sort of been kind of a fun side gig. So I've been at Marlin for 4 years now. In fact, speaking of pandemic, I joined March 2nd of 2020, which is a pretty interesting time to join a new firm.
That sounds like that's a causal link there, man. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I went down. We have a pretty cool office, actually. Our office is in Hermosa Beach. We're one block from the beach. I went down there. So I'm up north in Northern California. And, I went down there and got back on the 5th. I was at LAX, and it was just super eerie. So the role changed a bit, just in terms of you ended up doing things a lot more remote than expected. But the reality is, I think we all adjusted and have been able to do a lot. I came into private equity really with kind of three kind of experiences, all pretty much centered on B2B go-to-market.
Yep.
Kind of in my sort of whatever it is, 20, 25 years before I joined. So I was a management consultant for many years. So I started at Bain and Company as a generalist. And really the work that I enjoyed much more was, the growth work as opposed to the cost reduction work. And I did a bunch of Salesforce effectiveness work, which
Oh,
was kind of early work for Bain in that space. I eventually was at two other consulting firms. I was at the Alexander Group, where I helped them sort of, build out the West
yep.
Coast business,
Yep.
as well as McKinsey, where I kind of was a part of the go-to-market practice there. So learned a lot of consulting. Where you really learn a lot, of course, is in kind of operating roles. And in some ways, Alexander Group is a pretty cool operating role, because we had my job was selling sales consulting to sales leaders who thought consulting was
Meta.
like a BS.
Yeah.
So you really learn to sell in that kind of environment. I did two startups. So one was Lattice Engines, another one
Yep.
was a portal software company. And then I was a part of the leadership team at two large scaling companies, Salesforce and RingCentral. So combine all that, between consulting, operating company. We worked with a lot of go-to-market stuff at Lattice. Probably worked at about 100 companies when it comes to
Mhm.
go-to-market
Yep.
improvement.
Yep.
And so it's been fun.
It's kind of like the honeybee, right? Going around pollinating, picking up things here, dropping them off over here. Um, that's out awesome. For folks who may not be familiar, Alexander Group is you know, OG sales operations, sales excellence, consulting group. Really, if you for all the sellers and leaders out there, if you ever sell to sales organizations or sales operations profiles, the sales operations profile is one of two personas that Atrium interacts with. And if you see somebody that was at Alexander Group in their background, that usually means that they have their act together. So, like, Dale Chang over at Scale Venture
Yeah.
Partners is an example of that. Um, I'm blanking on the gentleman who was at Cloudflare, who ran their sales operations.
Oh, Manish Jindal.
Manish. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Manish, really bright guy as well. Awesome. Well, lots of expertise, which now is brought to bear with the Marlin Equity Portco. And so what we're going to Portcos, and so what we're going to talk about today is like what that framework looks like and kind of some of the components associated with it. A lot of it has to do with measuring, and like measuring and understanding like how we're like what we're doing, and are we doing enough of it, are we doing it the right way, and then improving that, which obviously is pretty core to data-driven management and data-driven go-to-market. Kind of related to that, we have like a fun offer here today. We're going to drop a link in the chat here, but if you're interested in getting a Oura ring, which I don't have one, I have I use my Whoop as my wearable for sleep tracking, kind of activity tracking stuff. But some people really enjoy the Oura ring there for health tracking, sleep tracking, et cetera, et cetera. It does a really good job of kind of instrumenting, the quantity and quality of your activities, and then also your sleep behaviors as well. So we're going to go ahead and drop that link here, and all we ask for in return is a quick discovery call with our team here. Cool. So what we're going to talk about here is, and I actually, when I proposed this event with AJ, because as I was mentioning earlier, Atrium is, one of the things that we've been finding in our recent go-to-market is there's a lot of appetite in the scaling sales organization market for sales performance management software, especially in the private equity backed sales kind of sales organizations. They have a very, very specific thing that they're seeking to do over a very specific kind of time horizon, whether it's like 3 years or 5 years or 7 years or what have you. Kind of get in, do a very specific thing, or where there's like a hypothesis, and then exit the organization, via IPO or a transaction to another private equity fund after that thing has been done. And so, of course, like that thing that has been done, whether it's like a cross sell of like rolled up software, or just enhancing the operational tempo of the go to market team, or pulling some costs out, things like that. There's urgency around that. Like, we're not here to kind of like goof around. We're here to really drive that performance. And I think when like, so we have observed this, and of course I'd had the luck of like interacting with AJ a number of times, and I was like, hey, we should like have you talk with our community or with our audience. And AJ's response, which is like, that's great, we actually have a specific framework. Not surprising in retrospect, we actually have a very specific framework that we use for deploying across, when we deploy to help our portfolio companies. So that's what we're going to be talking through here today. Conveniently, it has a nice little acronym. So AJ, you want to share a little bit about that, and then what we're just going to do is we're just going to jump through kind of like the different sections of that framework, and kind of like what the key jobs are that are done while that is when that is being deployed across the a given portfolio company.
Yeah, sure. In fact, maybe Pete, what I could do is start with a little bit of the problem statement. I mean,
Please.
first of all, think about go-to-market in the context of B2B SaaS. That's what most of our companies are in the B2B SaaS category. Of course, we know go-to-market is critical. It's the driver of revenue. It's the enabler of growth. And growth, while we want efficiency, growth is still by far and away the key driver of kind of valuation and having positive outcomes for all the people involved with the company. And we love SaaS because it's got big margins, 80 to 90% gross margins. But when you think about the investment, it's huge. It's just look at public SaaS companies, 40 to 45% of revenue is spent on marketing and sales. That's what's more than double what's spent on R&D. And so it's a huge investment. But I mean, despite the big investment, there's a ton of inefficiency. And we just see so much kind of variance compared to, you think about manufacturing for a moment. I mean, go-to-market's got a lot of process, just like manufacturing has process. But, manufacturing's had Six Sigma. They're really focused on sort of, nailing how things work well. And go-to-market, there's huge variance. But 2% of MQLs result in deals. Less than 40% of AEs make quota, even less in 2023. Sales rep attrition is greater than 20%. Churn is, usually around 15% in companies. That's been on the uptick. So there's just a huge amount of waste and variance. So by comparison to manufacturing, go-to-market's probably like 0.2 sigma.
A lot of upside, a lot of opportunity for improvement, right? Target rich environment.
Yeah, there really is. So let me tell you the story of how we got to Drive. When I first started, we came up with a bunch of different performance levers, things that we knew made sense, segmentation and targeting, account-based marketing, pricing, et cetera. And we developed kind of a menu of 16 performance improvement levers. And even kind of expanded over time as we put on post sales, it went to 24. There are actually 40 things in our menu now. But of course, we only do a handful. There's certain things that foundationally that we want to get right in every company. But what we really kind of distilled down to over time was, hey, look, we need to ensure that we're nailing the fundamentals. And that's where this sort of all came from. And, in the time that I've been at Marlin, we've probably done best practice sessions on 50 or so different topics. And what really helped us bring it together was we did a lot of Zoom sessions over the course of the pandemic. And it was really last year that we started to bring people together. And when we did 30 roundtables with all our kind of revenue leaders across all our companies, first in Nashville, then we did another set in London. And what we really came down to was it's about the basics. And we need to make sure that the fundamentals are handled well. So we wanted to come up with kind of a framework for how to think about it. And that's really where Drive came from. It's 5 core competencies that we want to pull together. So the first one really is differentiate. And this refers to positioning and messaging. So let's think about the problem statement here. There's been this explosion of investment in SaaS companies, and there's this sea of sameness. You're not just competing against direct players in your industry. There's so many other solution providers who are garnering for the attention.
Sound similar,
Yeah, well, they're all going after your same persona. They're all going after your same kind of ICP. And not to mention, you're competing against the status quo. So it's really a lot of things that like the challenger company really sort of nailed, but very few people kind of act upon. So how do you get attention in this kind of crazy environment? What you have to do, and even further, I mean, if you're a startup, I mean, it's kind of an irrational thing to buy from a startup. Like, why would you do that? There's so much risk associated with that. So, what you really need to do is find a critical problem that your customer cares about. If you're a startup, it's got to be urgent pain for them to solve. That's
Right.
why they would consider investing in the solution of the startup. But the key is, how are you going to get insight? How are you going to get their attention?
Yep.
You've got to come up with an insight that actually really captures their attention. And this is the problem. A lot of people lead with their solution. They lead with ROI metrics that are unsubstantiated.
Sure.
What you really need to do is make sure that you're framing a problem for the customer and sort of leading with insight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big part of what we try to help people do. So it starts with actually continuing the marketing, the market research, the customer research, the competitor research, and
Mm-hmm.
find some kind of compelling insight, and
Yeah.
make sure you translate that in, and such that it really starts with that first pitch. When a BDR actually calls outbound to a company, they
Yep.
have to lead with an insight that actually makes people stop in their tracks and pay attention.
Yep.
And if they don't do that, you're not gonna engage your potential buyer.
Yeah.
So
It's very
positioning,
like,
I think, is a big thing that we put a lot of energy into.
yeah, a lot of like, yeah, like, I mean, I totally hear this and I can identify with this as relates to Atrium. Um, and I think then, I think this highly aligns with I as well, the ideal customer profile, because if you're not differentiated, right, if you're insufficiently differentiated or even insufficiently differentiated in your own mind, right, then it's hard for you to understand exactly who has that white hot version of that pain that you solve, right? So it's better to have a lot fewer raving fans and other people who specifically know that they don't care about you and that you are not for them, versus being like okay for a lot of people, right? Okay for a large market. And so really where that kind of comes down to is differentiation. So like as an example with us, you know 4 or 5 years ago, and part of this has to do with like product development as well. Atrium was a very compelling like sales analytics solution. You could use it in the C-suite. You could use it at the CRO level. You could use it at the manager level or the rep level, et cetera, et cetera. And then, over time, what we realized was that the thing that was really unserved in the market, because you had existing BI solutions like Tableau or Power BI or what have you, that really did a pretty good job, especially with the data team, of servicing the CFO or the CRO or the board or what have you. The place where people were really, really unserved and also just couldn't be served by those existing solutions was at the manager level, was at the rep level. And of course, what that meant was less about like analytics and more about management, right? And so when we started talking about management and performance management, right, that's when people started kind of sitting up and taking notice and saying, yes, we have a performance management challenge within our organization because our managers are unable to consume and synthesize and make sense of these walls of dashboards that are provided to them by the data team in Tableau or what have you. Oh, and then by the way, even after that, they then struggle to know what to do about that and then actually to act on that and then change rep behavior. And so as we kind of changed this over the last like 18 months or so, went from being this, what do we call like an analytics kind of story to being about management, and specifically performance management. That's when people, a VP of sales operations, would stand up and say, oh man, yes, I've been banging my head against the wall trying to get people to consume these dashboards. Or the CRO would sit up and say, yes, my managers are hesitant to performance manage or what have you. So we've lived this ourselves as an organization. And so if an organization doesn't perceive that they have like a performance management problem, that's okay. Like we'll shake their hand and like we'll part ways as friends, right? But again, it goes down to, you got to be really differentiated in order to then like stop people in their track, and then also like, have effective sales conversations that advance, right? So, even if somebody who doesn't have that burning hot need is willing to take a first meeting with you, or a second meeting, or a third meeting, they're probably not going to close. That's actually just a waste of AE time. So I highly understand that. Maybe we can talk a little bit about this notion of raising the bar here, because I think this is something that a lot of organizations could definitely benefit from, like a third party coming in and helping them understanding what good is, and where they might not be meeting the mark.
Yeah, I think especially, current environment, we're just seeing an increasing chasm between top performers and sort of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it actually starts with, just kind of plot it out, to take a look at, hey, what is the current performance? What is the current performance distribution? What we're actually finding is, that but because of the gap, a lot of companies actually have too much sales capacity.
Sure.
And so step number one is just make sure you're right sizing.
Sure.
If you've got a long tail of people who aren't performing, and you have the 80-20 rule applying, start with that, in terms of capacity. And then in terms of raising sales rep talent and manager effectiveness, this is where we're putting in a lot of work. The first part of it is hiring. So there was
Sure.
a lot of turbo hiring that was done in 2021, 22, and a lot of the
Do you have a pulse? You know how to turn on. You have a pulse. You know how to turn on a Zoom. You can show up to a Zoom meeting half the time.
Yeah,
You're hired. Let's go.
yeah, and hey, when there's inbound demand and your category's on fire, it's great. It sort of hides a lot of things. Hiring salespeople is hard. So we're actually, reinvigorating usage of sales talent assessment solutions.
Awesome.
There's kind of three types that we found quite useful. The first type is related to, really just kind of aptitude,
Love it.
and just kind of getting a sense of, are you a structured thinker, or are you a good problem solver?
What do you guys use for that? Do you have your own assessment that you've created, or is there a
So,
vendor?
so we do like the CCAT, but we're not obsessive about it by any means.
Yeah.
We think, especially for early stage career people, it's just a read on,
Sure.
getting a sense of, how well are they able to think on their feet,
Yep.
and how analytical are they. So it's a good input. The second one is there's some more behavioral ones that are more personality assessment ones. Criteria Corp actually does have a kind of a version of that as well. We use them for both aptitude as well as behavioral. And then the third is related to sales competencies,
Yep.
to get a sense of, hey, are you actually good at discovery? Are you actually good at objection handling? Are you good at actually sort of, framing a value sell? And there's a company called Octus that we're just starting to work with there. So we do think that these are helpful tools. That the Octus is probably a little bit more, for upper mid-market enterprise selling.
Yep.
But we're just trying to, remove some of the performance variance.
On the way in the door, right? Like having a high bar. Those are awesome, and thank you for sharing those. One of the things that I find is like doing any sort of the kind of like the HR. Back in the day, I was an HR tech entrepreneur, so I know a couple things about these things. The job simulation is like kind of the general terminology for this, and so if you can have people like do the actual behaviors, like the metaphor I like to use is like NFL combine. It's like, hey man, don't show me don't tell me how fast you can run and like how high you can jump. Just go ahead and do it. It's fine. And so the way you can do that from a sales hiring standpoint is I like written intakes. I think with like large language AI, that might kind of erode that a little bit, but like you'd be shocked that you get like 50% of people like literally can't follow instructions on the way in the door to do a written assessment. And then of course just like doing mock disco calls on their solution. I'm not a big fan of having someone like sell your solution, because I think they're like, that's probably not a great expectation, but they should definitely be able to sell their solution. Right? And like you as a hiring manager should probably be able to figure out like what their prospect might care about, and so on and so forth. So okay, so filtering on that way in, what about like raising the bar after they're in, right?
Yeah,
After they've been
so
onboarded and need to be managed.
So I think we're big believers on codifying a sales process and then
Sure.
coaching to it. What I think we would say you have to be mindful of, though. I mean, you can go create this sort of 50 to 100-page document on, hey, here's the sales process, here's the customer, here are the personas, here's everything to do in stage to stage, how to objection handle. These are all good things, but you have to make it digestible for the sales reps. And really what we've seen is that there's certain things that really differentiate how successful a seller is going to be. The biggest parts that we focus on is discovery and qualification. Because look, many companies are selling a solution that there isn't necessarily a budget for it, and that's why sort of things like band as a qualification criteria doesn't necessarily kind of apply in a lot of situations. So what you really need to do is be able to have a structured conversation to surface the pain and know enough about the customer, their business problems, and to structure that kind of conversation. And so it is codifying the practices of your top sellers and putting that into some sort of documentation. But then it's about continuously practicing it and coaching to it. So we're putting a lot more emphasis on enablement, and then making these sort of sales process kind of playbooks a lot more bite-sized in terms of the things that we focus on.
Yeah, very compressed. I mean, we see this a lot too. I was going to comment on this as relates to your experience with hundreds of sales organizations. It's actually one of my favorite things about our job, and our account executives absolutely love this because they get to interact with so many different sales organizations and just learn all sorts of different sales motions. And of course, once they get to kind of tenure, then they can start cross-pollinating that. And you'd be shocked how many organizations show up and really struggle with they don't have entry criteria and exit criteria for their stages and so on and so forth. So just breaking it down so it's really, really easy for them to to understand that can be a very impactful what am I supposed to be doing right now at this point in the sale. Okay, wonderful. And then what about managers? Because you've got manager effectiveness here too. This is our big thing, near and dear to our heart.
And this is what's key. So first of all, I think you have to kind of guide people on what it means to be a manager, how you should be spending your time, who you spend your time with. And then it's really what the managers need to do is that they need to provide insight about, what is a rep doing that's working versus not working. And so I think this is where getting conversational intelligence is super key. And we're using Atrium in a number of our companies. And it just sort of helps them understand, hey, what part of the sales process are they doing well? What are the parts that they're struggling? And it even actually just sort of starts with, people talk about sort of skill, will, kind of activity and results. And, we find, I would very much agree with what you highlighted. We can throw all kinds of great analysis at the managers, but at the end of the day, we need to distill it down to a handful of insights that they can use to actually engage with their seller. And then it's helpful to prompt them on what are kind of the key questions that you should be asking in your coaching conversations. And you talk about variance in sales rep performance. There's probably even more variance when it comes to managers. So giving them some sort of structured guidance has been really, really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that we see quite a bit where, there's a presentation that I do on engendering a culture of performance, of high performance in organizations. Maybe we can get that calendared here in the future for folks to join. But really, the frontline manager is the place where the rubber hits the road there, right? So we probably have a number of sales operations people who are joining us here today, in addition to sales leadership. But sales operations can, they can create all sorts of analytical assets or what have you. They can even do the interpretation. It's very costly, right? But in a scaled organization, maybe a RingCentral or a Salesforce or a LinkedIn or whatever, oftentimes sales operations will have analysts who are there to do the synthesis and maybe even the recommendation for the managers. But then when they deliver that to the managers or when they deliver to the reps, it's very hard for the managers or the reps to actually consume that and act on it mainly just because like the belief is that those folks don't necessarily know what they're talking about, and oftentimes that's true, right? So like we see this quite a bit when we talk with customers. We have very, very bright and analytical sales operations, revenue operations leaders and practitioners who are very, very data native. And so, they can read a dashboard like falling out of bed. And what they don't quite understand is how that is not the case for a sales manager or a second line sales manager or a front or a rep. And so they struggle to understand, like, how could you, like, I can see it right there, how can you not see that? And so this is why, and whereas a lot of managers are like, man, I just need to understand, like, are my reps busy? Are they having sufficient customer facing meetings? Do they have enough pipeline? Do they have enough pipeline coming in? And then are they advancing that pipeline? And then are they working it appropriately as indicated by, certain hygiene metrics? And so it ends up being, what we like to call operational metrics or tactical metrics that is for management, like tactical performance management metrics. And then I'm going to share, since this is the right time to do so, I'm going to share a little bit about how we do this here at Atrium. And it's like, that's our big thing, is to help managers, frontline managers, and also reps drive better performance through better management. Yes, it is data driven in like at its core, but really because of the advent of large language model AI, now what you can have is talking directly to these individuals, to these managers, to these reps, and turning what has historically been, eye-watering walls of charts into words backed up by insights, right? Backed up by images, such that the manager can understand, hey, this is what's going well with this rep. Here's where, this rep needs assistance, specifically as grounded in their performance metrics. So it's literally spelled directly out for them, the way that like a very helpful sales operations analyst might do so. You know, if you had infinite budget in the world. And so whether that's for frontline managers looking across their team and saying, hey, you've got 8 reps, you've got 6 reps, here's what's happening all across your team and kind of where the biggest areas for improvement are. And then specifically, here's what's happening, on a rep by rep basis. Here's the reps that maybe you should pay attention to, that you might be concerned about. Here's the reps that are taking care of business. And then also, doing that at a rep level as well. And then driving action. That's the big thing that we hear from a lot of our customers is, my favorite quote on this is a gentleman named Steve Goldberg, who used to be the CRO at SalesLoft. He likes to say, we're not here to admire a problem, right? Like if we see a problem, we're gonna fix it. And so in this case, the problem might be this rep right here has a pipeline hygiene problem, as indicated by like an egregious number of stuck opportunities and an egregious number of untouched opportunities. And so as a result, we're going to take action on that, right? We're going to fix that, right? I, as the manager, need to understand that this rep has this hitch in their giddy up, right? Like they got this problem in their swing. It's a pipeline hygiene problem. And then what Atrium is going to do is it's going to generate an enablement program for us, suggest an enablement program as needed, and then also allows the manager to then take action directly on that and send an email to the rep and saying, hey, we should talk about this on our next one-on-one. Here, we're going to talk about your pipe hygiene. Let's probably get some time on the calendar and make that happen. And so what you want to get out of that is this, like what we call this virtuous cycle here of like, hey, we figure out what the issue is. We're going to go ahead and prescribe it. We're going to fix, the manager's going to fix it, right? Ideally, that performance improves. If it doesn't, we're going to have another issue, right? We're going to have another topic, which is like maybe after a couple times, we're going to offboard this person. But if it does improve, yay, we get to move on to the next problem. And like, there's always another problem, right? This is like what all of us maximizers are like. It's just like, continuous improvement. We don't declare victory. It's like, okay, there's always going to be a next problem that we're gonna tackle. And then the last thing that we've kind of noticed in our, as we've been deploying this, AI focused sales performance management solution, is that talking directly to the rep is very impactful as well. I don't know, AJ, if you're much of a Whoop fan or like a Garmin watch or like an Apple Watch or whatever, or actually our Ring that we were talking about earlier. But the notion of essentially like having the instrumentation be very close to the metal, and then also pushing that information directly to the individual to change their behavior. Like, hey, you're doing a really good job on XYZ. By the way, that prospecting activity, not where it needs to be, right? But like, I know, but you know what? I have full faith that you're going to be able to get there. So in the last like 12 months, after we've been kind of like infusing Atrium with this large language model AI, it's been extremely impactful for those less analytical, kind of like less technical consumers, which is the frontline manager, the rep, et cetera, et cetera. Gartner's been a big fan of our approach, and we work with hundreds of customers that to do exactly that. So a lot of them are private equity backed organizations. So like, Gainsight's a Vista equity backed company. Fourth is obviously backed by Marlin, Tango backed by Marlin. We have a number of others as well. So that's what we kind of spend our time doing, is focusing right there on that manager effectiveness and also kind of automating that assistant managerial behavior. And people really like it. Cool. So I know the next thing we wanted to talk about here was, we talked about differentiating and making sure that we're well differentiated in the market, and then we have good people who are in place to catch those leads that are coming in, right? The right people in the right seats that are well enabled and being managed appropriately. Okay, cool. So like we've got our assembly lines all lined up here. AJ, how do we feed the assembly lines?
Yeah, so I think the reality for most of our companies, Pete, is that they have limited sales capacity. So you want to make sure that it's truly focused.
Sure.
And so we all, of course, talk about ideal customer profile. And the reality is, like, the universe of potential accounts that you want to go after is completely knowable.
Yeah,
We know
nowadays.
exactly how
Yeah.
many companies there are,
Yep.
greater than 100 employees all throughout the world. And so if you want to tackle, specific industries, specific geographies, there's a lot that you can do. So, and I would say this is particularly an issue because we're actually in an environment where we're broadly seeing pipeline go up. But the
Recently,
question is,
yeah.
yeah, but the question is it really real pipeline? So our
Yes.
focus is on measuring ideal customer profile pipeline.
And does it advance, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So it starts with segmentation and targeting.
Okay.
And this is kind of, what we used to do at Lattice.
Yeah,
We
totally.
take data, the firmographic data on, company revenue, industry, who's growing. You take the technographic data, and then just any other kind of data signals that you could take. And, we would build, rules-based models off of that using
Yep.
data from Lattice. And Lattice worked better for kind of cross-sell, upsell models when you're doing something predictive. There's
Interesting.
another tool that we're using now that we complement. We've actually moved towards it. It's called Rev.ai. And so they actually have all the firmographic, technographic, and kind of readiness to buy kind of data. And
Interesting.
and it's just a lot simpler to use. So we kind of put in here's our ICP, here's our kind of existing customers, and it's got kind of the universe of accounts. At least for North America right now, they don't quite have Europe yet, and it sort of will do a big scoring of potential attractiveness.
Yep.
And so we combine those two. So we do a rules-based model, and then we do the AI-based kind of algorithm model. And we use that to basically score the entire kind of total addressable market, and then we feed that down at the rep level to make sure that it gets down to everybody's territories. We're not saying it's perfect, but we want to give them something to react to. So instead of saying, "Hey, I've got 300 accounts in my territory, and I'm going to make my own decision about how I prioritize it," we're going to kind of say, "Hey, these feel like this A set of 20 accounts is where you should focus first. Then here's the next 50, here's the next 75, etc." And so it just gives them a lot more guidance. And then the key is to make sure that the territories are balanced, and that the marketing teams, the BDRs, partners actually understand that as well, and ensure that everybody's kind of aligned on that.
Yep.
And what you want to do is you actually want to have that in Salesforce, that ABCD, and then you measure to see, hey, am I getting activity? Am I getting meetings? Am I getting opportunities? How's it converting? And is it converting better? Is my scoring correct? So that's the thing that we're trying to run all the way through. Because at the end of the day, if you have a limited sales capacity, you want it focused on the sweet spot.
The white hot center. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So if we were to kind of like recap here, it's like, hey man, we want to make sure that we don't have slack capacity. And one thing I kind of neglected to mention earlier, a really great way of understanding how full or how slack your capacity is, literally just looking at how highly utilized your sellers are. Like, I was explaining this to my staff the other day. I was doing a training on private equity backed companies. You can imagine the impact associated with literally just taking your sellers from having 10 customer facing meetings a week to 15 customer facing meetings a week. Like, literally just something as basic as that. So do that. Make sure that our reps are, the right reps are in seat, right? That we're hiring appropriately, and then we have the sales motion nice and decoded in a very basic way, and then making sure the managers are are enabled and empowered to drive accountability. And so then what we want to do is make sure that we're putting, we're putting the pitches right in the middle of the strike zone there by making, and like we had this situation as well. I was noting this earlier, that really what we realized was that the type of organization that we work best with probably has north of 50 sellers, right? Because that's where you've got 10 managers or so. Like, it's too many sellers to kind of keep in your head. You have enough managers where you need to actually facilitate consistency of management, et cetera, et cetera. The organization probably has a legacy analytics solution in place that they've tried to shoehorn into that managerial use case, and the managers have struggled, and Oregon rejected that. We saw that in our most successful customers, and we said, great, we're going to lean into that. Also, we're going to lean into that from a pipe gen standpoint, right? We're going to make sure that we're talking to those folks. We're pulling those folks out of the database in question, whether it's ZoomInfo or Apollo or D&B or what have you. And then we're going to put activity against those folks. We're going to put activity, and we see this with our customers where we went from, you could pull, I think it was like 4 custom fields into Atrium. Now you can pull up to like 32 custom fields into Atrium, because organizations would say, hey, actually, these are our these are our account tiers right here. Also, we have a cross-sell, and I know we'll get to this in a second, but we have a cross-sell initiative, and we want to tag our accounts against that. And also, so guys, Atrium, can you help us understand which of the accounts that are owned that have this criteria, that are a cross-sell suspect for this new solution, which of those are untouched by our account executives, or how many of those have been touched this week or this month, and how many opportunities have been generated out of those, et cetera. But it all kind of comes down to making sure that we're nice and aligned on the kind of the raw materials that should be coming into the assembly line, and we're not putting bad raw materials into that that assembly line of enabled sellers there. That's really kind of fantastic. And then I think the next step here is like, great, now we're getting good meetings on the calendar, right? Like, ideally our account executives are showing up to these meetings. It's like they're ICP, they're technographically aligned, they're firmographically aligned. I mean, maybe even they have intent, like maybe they have an initiative live already in the organization. Like, they've kind of been grumpy about the problem that that the solution sells. And so now what we need to be able to do is like do good value selling. So how do you guys do kind of help with that?
Yeah, what I would start with is, I mean, there's been a lot of software buying over the last few years. So customers are really discerning now. They're not buying anything unless you're solving a real problem for them and there's a compelling business case for doing it. I think the issue is there's just, everyone gets, oh, I need ROI. So there are too many faux ROI claims that are out there. It's like, hey, everyone, we improved the ROI of this was 1,000%, or we'll improve sales productivity by 20+%. And there are actually some very well-known market leaders who still have this big claims. I think there are a number of there are a handful of kind of key success factors here. Number one is you do need a methodology that actually is aligned with how a customer thinks about it. And you've got to, start building against that methodology in discovery. And it's got to be a mutual process. And recognize that different personas may care about different things. Like your CEO and CFO, they care about generating revenue and saving money.
Yep.
But the department leader might be focused on their specific objectives, and they
Yep.
might be more focused on process and budget. And then you have managers who are going to actually execute it. They're really worried about, hey, is this going to make my work, my life harder, or is it going to make it easier? So
That's right.
there's more than just dollars associated with ROI measurement. Is sort of the key thing.
Yeah, personal impact, right?
Exactly. So be mindful of that by persona. But I think the big
Totally.
I think the big thing that people need to focus on is applying it across the sales cycle. A lot of times ROI is done, late in the deal process, to get approval from the buying committee. It should really start from the website. To say, here's the value of doing this. It should, be the first meeting, gathering some data points about how to, think about framing what is the pain and what is the potential opportunity. And then you should go deeper in discovery. Certainly it should be in proposal generation, but then it also really needs to be, put into the process for your QBRs, and especially as you get to renewal. And so it really needs to be across the entire customer lifecycle, not just be sort of
one off. Yeah, like sprinkle some on as it's like going out the door. Yeah, I mean, I think what's so funny about this, and AJ, I don't think you ever did any product marketing, but a lot of this that we're describing right here has a substantial product marketing kicker associated with it. And I was a baby PMM a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away at VMware. But like to you, it's funny, our marketing team is literally putting together the finishing touches on a case study right now where it's like, hey, cool. Do you think that you have a sales performance management challenge? Right? Like, do you feel that like the level of effort and like the level of quality of execution in your org isn't where it needs to be, and you think that there's an opportunity to drive that better through management? Well, we've seen our customers drive 30% more customer facing activity out of their reps, or a 50% improvement in the efficacy of which they've executed against their pipeline, as indicated by pipeline hygiene. We've seen a 30% rise in conversion rates going through the pipe as people pay attention to this, all of which results in a 15% lift in per rep bookings attainment, blah, 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 right? So if you do something like that, like, yeah, that's great for putting in front of the CFO, but if you show up, like if that's on the website and someone, like you have to think about it from the standpoint of the viewer, they show up and they're like, yeah, I think I might have a performance management challenge within my organization. Oh, gee whiz, this can drive a 25 or 30% lift in level of effort across the sales team and a 40% improvement in pipeline execution. Wow, click, I'm going to take a demo. Or when they show up and you're talking about that in your disco meeting, you like maybe you do your framing slides there, you talk about that. And when that when that stakeholder that you talk to says, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and socialize this and I'll come back to you. Now they're going to be socializing that with a lot more backbone, right, than previously, than just someone kind of like, talking at them. I really like that. And then lastly here, let's talk about expanding existing customers. I know this is really kind of key in the, in the private equity, private equity world, of like potentially adding a couple incremental solutions to the bag of an organization that are complementary. I know that like Fourth is a phenomenal example of this, with really kind of like the market leader in scheduling, but then adding on top of it payroll and talent management, and just like raising those average selling prices and kind of like, share of wallet within those customers. It's a very known play, but like we have another customer called Exactly. They started with incentive compensation management software, and of course now they have forecasting and of course territory management as well. Same buyer, kind of hooks into the same databases, et cetera. How do you guys facilitate this, AJ, in your organizations?
Yeah, so I think a variety of things that we're trying to do. The first one, Pete, is actually just making sure we focus on customer getting the time to value when
Sure.
they initially buy. So you can't do anything until the customer is actually getting value.
Yep,
And what we've seen a lot of software companies is that implementations get stalled, and that there are a lot of foibles in that process. What we find is a lot of companies are actually not measuring that closely, and it's not making its way up to kind of the leadership team. So I think that's number one. That number two is before you could really the retention event is the renewal event is a huge opportunity for actually driving kind of expansion. But you have to, of course, make sure that things are healthy there first. So do you have engagement of multiple stakeholders? Are you getting adoption? And are you doing that kind of value measurement that we talked about earlier? So those are sort of the precursors. And then the two things that I would say that we focus on is just like we had a targeting model for new logo acquisition,
Yep.
We put something similar in place for upsell and cross sell.
Yep.
So what we want to highlight centrally and then feed down to the reps is to say, hey, look, based on kind of a analysis of what other customers are doing, here are the best candidates for buying new product A, buying new product B, or for
Yep.
expansion, and having that be a structured, disciplined process. And then
Yep.
finally measuring it. So measuring it in aggregate, but it's just like an ABM dashboard. So if you've got 50 upsell, cross-sell opportunities, well, what progress are you making each month about getting meetings, about getting opportunities and progressing those discussions?
Those leading indicators, right?
So it's just, being disciplined about the white space.
Yeah, 100%. And like this is something. So we don't have multiple products here at Atrium, but we do have, the organizations will use us for their SDR, AE, and AM CSM teams. Oftentimes, what we'll do is we'll deploy with the SDR plus AE team, and then oftentimes the organization will be happy about where they have seen rises in level of effort and kind of level of quality execution, and they'll want to see about that in a post-sale environment. So what we do is we model that on the account object in Salesforce. So we say this is the amount of like seats that are deployed of Atrium, and then this is the size of the sales organization as indicated by, I think it's like the LinkedIn Sales Navigator function or whatever. And if we're not like substantially wall to wall, because like we might have an organization where we have like, I don't know, like 100 rep seats that are deployed, and we might say, hey, that's like pretty good. Well, not if it's a 500 person sales organization. It's not very good, right? And so just understanding how fully penetrated you are. Another thing that we see, we're starting as we work with larger and larger sales organizations, we're seeing a lot of organizations that like want to drive initiatives around cross sell. So what they'll do is like they'll say, hey, we want to make sure that we're doing a good job with respect to pipe gen, right? So we're going to measure aggregate new opportunity inflow to the seller, right, on a per seller basis. We're going to goal on that. But what we'll also do is we'll do a subvariance there where we'll say, hey, we also want to make sure that these sellers have at least, I don't know, call it 5 new opportunities per quarter that are showing up that are tagged. And this is where people kind of get like a little hairy with respect to how do they model this? Like, is it an op type? Like of a new like a new product, or is it like some sort of like pick list or whatever? We've gotten to the point where like you can model it however you want. Atrium will be able to measure it, and then they'll just hold the reps accountable on that, where they can like we can look across our 20 sellers or our 50 sellers in the organization, or the manager can look across that and say, whoa, like Jimmy, what's up? We're in month 1 of the quarter. We just finished month 1 of the quarter, and you have 0 like new product cross-sell opportunities in your pipe. Everybody else is, everyone else has got 3 on their way to the 6 they're supposed to have. We gotta talk. We gotta fix this. Nice.
And that's what I think has been super helpful in a lot of the Atrium kind of views is look, it's not because they don't want to. Oftentimes they don't know how to. So it just helps you identify who's really good at the cross sell and who's not. And hey, let's get those people talking.
Yeah, or whatever the activity is, the cross sell or the prospecting, or who's great at pipe hygiene and who's maybe not great at pipe hygiene, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean the best way to influence reps and help them is actually from their peers.
Oh yes. Right? Yeah, like, oh, hey, Bobby, look at Bobby. Bobby's not magic. Bobby, you guys hang out at club together, right? Come on, like, he or she's not the teacher's pet. They're just doing it, right? Awesome. Well, AJ, this is super fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time here. Folks, I hope you learned as much as I did. This framework is really fantastic here. If you'd like to get yourself an Oura health tracking ring, we're going to go ahead and drop that link here in the chat. Otherwise, AJ, this was like super fantastic. We really appreciate you taking the time to do so. And everyone, have a great rest of your week. Okay.
Thanks so much, Pete.
Okay.
Take care.